Freud's shocking truth. You secretly want to keep suffering. What if I told you something so absurd, so offensive to your rational mind, that your first instinct would be to reject it outright? What if I said, you don't just experience suffering, you want it? Not consciously, of course, but deep down, somewhere hidden in the shadows of your psyche, you're attached to your pain. You cling to it, you feed it, you protect it, and if someone tried to take it away from you, really take it, you'd fight them. That's the shocking truth Sigmund Freud hinted at over a century ago. And today, we're going to unravel exactly why. Let's begin with something universal, the story we all tell ourselves. I want to be happy. I want to heal. I want to grow. But what if that's only half the story? What if beneath that desire lies a darker, unspoken truth, something Freud called the repetition compulsion? It's the eerie tendency of the psyche to recreate the very conditions that caused us pain. The child with the distant parent grows into an adult who falls in love with emotionally unavailable people. The person who is shamed into silence becomes someone who constantly doubts their own voice. We think we're chasing healing, but what we're really doing is reenacting familiar suffering. Why? Because it's known. And the known, even when it hurts, feels safer than the unknown. Freud believed that the unconscious mind is not some passive reservoir of forgotten memories. It's an active force, shaping our behaviors, our relationships, our identities. It's like a puppeteer behind the curtain, pulling strings we don't even know exist. And one of its most twisted tricks is this: it makes us suffer on purpose. Not because we're masochists, but because suffering becomes a form of self-recognition, a mirror, a way to feel real. Think about it. When do you feel most yourself? Often, it's not during moments of peace. It's during crisis, during heartbreak, during the deep ache of loneliness or failure. Those moments hurt, but they also confirm something. They say, yes, this is who you are. This is your story.
Click subscribe to this channel to get more profound insights.
Now pause. Ask yourself this: what story about your suffering have you been repeating for years? Is it the belief that no one ever truly sees you? That you're never enough? That people always leave? That you always screw things up? These aren't just passing thoughts. They're identities. And once we identify with our pain, we defend it like it's sacred. We might say we want to change, but secretly, we fear what would happen if we actually did. Who would we be without our victimhood? Without our trauma? Without the narrative that we've leaned on to explain everything that doesn't work in our lives? Freud didn't think we were evil. He thought we were complex. He saw in us a battleground between our conscious desires and unconscious attachments. And often, the unconscious wins. That's why people sabotage relationships that seem too healthy. That's why we forget to follow through on habits that would actually help us. That's why we gravitate toward chaos even while claiming we want peace. Because deep down we believe that suffering is deserved, that it's familiar, that it's proof we exist. And here's where it gets really uncomfortable. Some part of you might enjoy your suffering. Not in a twisted, sadistic way, but in the way a tragic movie makes you cry and you like it. There's drama in it, power, attention, identity. We live in a culture that rewards pain with validation. The more broken your story, the more compelling it becomes. You post about your struggles and people respond. You stay in a cycle and your friends comfort you. You're in pain, but you're also seen. And being seen, even for your suffering, feels like love. So what do we do with this? Deny it? Bury it? Pretend we're above it? No. That's the trap. The only way out is through awareness. Radical, uncomfortable, ego-shattering awareness. It means catching yourself in the act, to noticing when you're choosing the same pain again. Noticing when you're clinging to a narrative that no longer serves you. Noticing when you say, "I want to heal," but act in ways that guarantee you won't. That's the first step. Not change, not transformation. Just seeing it. Because when you see it clearly, the illusion starts to crumble. You realize you're not broken. You're just patterned. Patterned to repeat what's familiar. Patterned to stay in the known. Patterned to equate pain with identity. But you are not your patterns. You are not your past. You are not your suffering. You are the awareness that sees all of it. And that awareness, that is freedom. The comfort of misery, why letting go of pain feels like losing yourself. You'd think that freedom from suffering would feel like liberation, like clarity, like joy. But what if I told you that for most people, the path toward healing feels more like loss than gain? That when we truly begin to let go of our pain, we don't feel light at first, we feel disoriented, empty, almost like we're grieving something. And that's because we are. We're grieving the version of ourselves that was built on the architecture of misery. Freud saw this long before it became popular to talk about trauma and healing. He understood something deeply uncomfortable. We don't just endure pain, we adapt to it. We build our self-image around it. And when it starts to dissolve, it feels like something inside us is dying. Think about the way we narrate our lives. I'm the one who was abandoned. I'm the one who had to be strong. I'm the one who never got what I needed. These aren't just events, they become identities. And when those identities start to crack, we panic. Because if I'm not the person who always gets hurt, then who am I? If I'm not the one who's always proving my worth, or staying silent to keep the peace, or chasing people who can't love me if I stop doing those things, what's left of me? There's a kind of existential terror in that question, because it reveals that we've mistaken our wounds for our essence. That's why letting go of pain can feel like death. Not physical death, but the death of the ego, the death of the story. And the ego doesn't go quietly. It fights for survival. It whispers healing is boring, peace is fake. You're not lovable unless you're suffering. And maybe the cruelest lie of all, no one will understand you if you're happy. Because in a strange way, misery connects us. It gives us something to share, to bond over, to be known for. We wear our suffering like a badge, or sometimes a shield. It protects us from vulnerability, from change, from the unknown. Freud didn't just theorize about this, he saw it play out in the therapy room over and over. Patients would make progress, feel lighter, even joyful, and then sabotage it. They'd miss appointments, they'd pick fights, they'd spiral into old habits. It's not because they were weak. It's because the pain, as awful as it was, had become home. And the human psyche, above all, seeks familiarity. It's better the familiar hell than the unknown heaven. So here's the moment of truth. What pain are you still protecting? What part of your identity would collapse if you stopped suffering in the same old ways? Would you lose your sense of purpose, your sense of being special or resilient or the strong one? Would healing mean giving up the attention, the sympathy, the excuses. These questions aren't meant to shame you, they're meant to wake you up. Because if you don't become conscious of the comfort you find in misery, it will run your life from the shadows. Now, let's take a breath. Because this isn't about blaming yourself for your suffering. It's about recognizing how deeply clever the psyche is. Freud's genius wasn't in saying, "You're doing this on purpose." It was in showing that we all have unconscious motives, hidden drives that override logic. And one of those drives, paradoxically, is the drive to repeat pain. Not because we want to suffer, but because we want to resolve something. And if we can't resolve it, we rehearse it over and over, hoping that this time the ending might be different. But it won't be, not until we break the loop. To do that, we have to be willing to feel the void that comes after suffering. The silence, the stillness, the terrifying absence of drama. And in that stillness, we meet a version of ourselves that isn't defined by survival or struggle or sadness. We meet the self that exists before the pain, the self that remembers what it's like to simply be. And that self, it's not boring, it's not numb, it's free. Free to choose new stories, free to create new patterns, free to love without fear and speak without shame. But we don't get there by bypassing our pain. We get there by mourning it, by honoring the role it played and then gently setting it down. Not because it didn't matter, but because we've outgrown it. The saboteur within, why you destroy the things that could actually heal you. Let's be brutally honest for a moment. How many times have you gotten close to something good, really good, and then found a way to ruin it? Maybe it was a relationship that was actually healthy. Maybe it was a job opportunity or a habit you'd been trying to build. Things were going well, maybe even too well, and then suddenly you pulled away. You ghosted, procrastinated, overthought, picked a fight, or just froze. And afterward you told yourself some story like it just wasn't right, or I knew I'd mess it up, or I didn't really want it anyway. But deep down, part of you knew you destroyed the very thing that could have healed you. And Freud saw this coming a mile away. He called this force the death drive, what he later described in terms of thanatos, the instinct towards self-destruction, opposing the life drive, eros. It's not as dramatic as it sounds. It doesn't mean you want to die. It means that inside all of us, there's a primitive force that resists integration, resists healing, resists forward movement. It's the part of us that says, I'd rather stay broken because at least I know how to be this version of me. It's the saboteur within, and it's not evil. It's scared. It's ancient. It's been keeping you safe in the only way it knows how, by keeping your world small and predictable. Let's say you meet someone who treats you with kindness, listens deeply, and genuinely loves you. At first, it feels amazing. But then, something strange happens. You feel uneasy, irritated, suspicious. You start looking for flaws, or testing them, or doubting whether you're even ready. And maybe eventually you push them away. Why? Because their love threatens the narrative you've been living. If you've always believed you're unlovable, then someone loving you doesn't feel like a gift, it feels like a threat, a contradiction, a disruption to the psychological order you've unconsciously maintained for years. And rather than integrate that new truth, which would require letting go of your old identity, you reject it. But you destroy the good thing to protect the painful thing you've come to believe is you. This is deeper than just self-sabotage. It's existential. It's about the fear of becoming someone new. Because to become someone new, you have to die in some way. The old self, the one who suffered, who clung to pain, who controlled their world through fear, has to step aside. And that's terrifying. Even healing feels threatening when your entire identity is built around a wound. Freud understood this paradox better than anyone. He saw that people don't fear change because it's hard. They fear change because it's unfamiliar, and the psyche, especially when wounded, confuses the familiar with the safe. So even if the familiar is toxic, lonely, or stagnant, it gets chosen over the unknown. That's why people return to abusive partners. That's why they sabotage progress. That's why they quit therapy right when it's starting to work. It's not because they're stupid. It's because their unconscious mind is screaming, "This is too different. This is too much. Go back to what you know." But what if you didn't listen this time? What if, the next time you caught yourself pulling away from something good, you paused and asked, "What am I afraid this will change about who I think I am?" And that question alone can puncture the illusion, because it brings the unconscious into the light. And once you see the saboteur, you stop being ruled by it. You can say, "I see you. I know you're trying to protect me. But I'm not that wounded child anymore. I don't need to stay small to stay safe." This is the real work of healing, not just learning to love yourself, but learning to stop attacking what wants to love you. It means catching the moment when you're about to run or lash out or numb, and choosing just for a breath to stay, to receive, to let life in, even when it's uncomfortable, especially when it's unfamiliar. Because the unfamiliar is where transformation lives. But we all carry this saboteur. It's part of the human condition. Freud didn't pathologize it, he made it visible. And in doing so, he gave us a path forward. Not a path without fear, but a path beyond it. One where we stop mistaking pain for identity and start letting ourselves evolve beyond it. Freedom from the loop. How to finally stop wanting the pain you keep repeating. So here we are, standing at the edge of something terrifying and beautiful. The possibility that your life could be different, not because the world changes, but because you stop needing your pain to define you. That's the final key Freud hinted at, and it's the one we wrestle with most. We don't just want to stop hurting, we want to stop needing the hurt. We want to finally break the loop. But how? First, we have to be radically honest with ourselves. Most of us are caught in a loop of repetition, not because we enjoy suffering, but because we've never learned who we are without it. Pain becomes a rhythm, a pattern, a comfort disguised as torment. And so we keep attracting the same people, making the same choices, telling ourselves the same stories. This always happens to me. I guess I just have bad luck. I'm not made for more. But these aren't facts. They're scripts, and you've been performing them for so long that you forgot you could change the narrative. To escape the loop, you don't need to rewrite your entire life overnight. But you need to interrupt the pattern once. Just once. That one breath where you don't react the same way. That one moment where you choose silence instead of self-criticism. That one time you say no to someone you always said yes to. That's where it begins. Because in that tiny disruption, your nervous system realizes, wait, there's another way. And from there, a new path unfolds, not easy, not always clear, but possible. The second step is compassion, not just for others, but for yourself. You have to understand that the version of you who clung to pain was doing the best they could. That version was trying to survive, trying to get through the chaos with whatever tools they had. And maybe those tools were self-sabotage, emotional withdrawal, or perfectionism. But they worked until now. Now, they're just keeping you small. So instead of hating that part of yourself, thank it, and then gently let it go. And third, you must be willing to live without a script. This is the hardest part. It's easy to stay in suffering because it gives you something to fight against. It gives you a role. But freedom? Freedom is open and defined. It requires you to wake up every day without knowing exactly who you are. It asks you to feel joy without guilt, and to rest without proving your worth, and to love without fear of abandonment. That kind of life is unfamiliar, but it's real. You don't stop wanting pain by force. You stop by seeing it clearly, by realizing it was never the truth of who you are. It was just a habit, a loop, and now it's time to leave it behind. Not because you have to, but because you're finally ready to live. And that is what Freud really meant. You secretly wanted to suffer, but now you consciously choose to be free.